Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's Daily Sip. I hope you had a lovely long bank holiday weekend. I know I was pretty exhausted Friday night and Saturday. Needed a bit of a rejuvenation, but yeah, nice long weekend and back for some great interviews already. And really good to catch up with an old friend today. We were just saying before we went live, it's been definitely 5 years, possibly longer, since we last had a proper catch up. I had a few emails in between, but in terms of working together, it was definitely longer ago. And I met Danny through what we would believe to be was when it was Radar, which is now Disability Rights UK, have a leadership academy, and I signed up a few years ago and was assigned to Danny, for better or worse from his perspective. He can trash talk me in a minute, but yeah, it was really, for me, it was a very good experience of having coaching for the first time, and we'll get into this more in a moment. Generally, how Danny uses coaching among other projects and initiatives, but just for me, it was a really lovely experience, and I would class Danny as a friend in the long run after working together. And yeah, it's just going to be nice to learn a bit more and share to you, the viewers, what Danny's been up to. So yeah, thanks for joining me today, Danny.
You're welcome. It's an absolute pleasure. It's lovely to see you again.
Cool. It's a shame we can do it in person, but such is the world at the moment, right?
I think the last time I saw you was in a cafe in Greenwich when we had lunch.
Cafe Rouge, I seem to remember.
That's right. And we had issues with the toilets. Do you remember?
Yes, I do remember that. Yeah. Part of the course, unfortunately, but yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, it was definitely the last time we were in person. And yeah, I mean, I suppose winding it back before, obviously mentioning briefly how we met and how we worked together, but it'd be great just for everyone watching just to generally get a background to you and the kind of things you've been up to in your career.
Okay. So essentially, I'm a working class boy born in North London, the oldest of four boys. And at a quite early age, I began to realise there was something that was different about me. And this is all relevant in terms of my career path.
Sure.
So I began to realise there was something different about me. And actually, what I was beginning to realise was that I was a gay man, or I was going to be a gay man when I grew up. And so I became very aware at an early age about difference, and I felt very different throughout my schooling. In my secondary schooling, I went to a school that was very committed to getting involved with the local community. And one of the things that the school did was set up educational classes for local people living with disabilities, learning disabilities. And so that essentially was the beginning of my career in social work, coaching and training, which is essentially my background. So I started out by teaching cookery to people with learning disabilities, and then later on went on to become a volunteer in a residential care home where they were living. I left school when I was 15, could barely read or write when I left school, hated school, was bullied and didn't enjoy it at all. I went to college, pretty much paid my way through college, and I did a childcare course. That was my initial sort of education around social work, I guess. And I got my first job in residential social work within London Borough of Haringey when I was just turned 18. And then I worked with people with learning disabilities and people with mental health problems for a number of years. And then in 1985, I was diagnosed, or was one of the first people to be diagnosed with HIV in the UK, which was a complete shock to me and a complete surprise. And I was basically told I had a year to 18 months to live and to put my affairs in order. So I began to think very quickly about what was important to me and what I wanted to achieve in life, in the short life I was expected to lead. And so I left my job as a social worker because it's incredibly stressful. Took a few years out, and then eventually got into training and education, and I was appointed training officer for HIV and AIDS in the London Borough of Hammersmith and Fulham. I was the first training officer in the country to be responsible for training around HIV and AIDS. And it was through that I became interested in coaching, ultimately.
Sure. Thank you for
the background there.
Yeah. No, I mean, and it's great because it's sort of, as you say, all those. It's always that hindsight. You see how dots join, and when you're going through and living it, you're sometimes like, what's all this about? And I mean, the news obviously delivered to you of being diagnosed with HIV and having 12 to 18 months left must have been very, very difficult to deal with and to work out what it all meant, what it was all for. But like, yeah, in the end, I mean, I obviously know you well from when we were working together and our other chats afterwards. But like, yeah, it absolutely just shows that you kind of wanted to empower others when they were sort of going through tough times and trying to work out what they wanted to do in their life. And obviously the disability narrative. Am I right that HIV is sort of classed as a disability under the Equalities Act?
It's classed as a chronic, manageable, long-term health condition.
Right.
Under the Equality Act.
Rolled off the tongue, that one.
Yes, so there you go. I mean, interesting. Later on in life, I mean, I was diagnosed 35 years ago. I'm still here, folks.
Yeah.
And I've begun to understand maybe why that is. But it's been a very challenging journey.
Yeah.
And it's been one where I've had to learn to empower myself, which is one of the reasons I got into coaching, because I think coaching is very empowering.
Yeah.
And I essentially coach myself all the time, and I work on my resilience all the time. And I think they're the key. What some of the key reasons why I'm here, have been here so long, is I've always been very, very determined. I've always been very goal focused, which of course coaching is all about goals. And throughout the process, I've become very resilient.
Yeah.
Because it has been some of it has been very traumatic journey. But essentially, I've worked with people with a whole range of disabilities since I was a teenager. That's essentially what I've done throughout my career. I've essentially been freelance now for about must be 20 odd years now, and I focus very much on coaching, so helping people, enabling people to achieve their own personal goals. But I've also got very much into doing stuff around employability and helping people gain employment, refine their interview techniques, develop, impactful CVs, that type of thing. So a lot of the work I'm doing these days is associated with employment.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, I always know when I was at my scope days and the general sort of disability rights, disability inclusion, there are a part of the disability community for different reasons where work is not really going to be so possible. And there was always that fight for the sort of the hardest hit march and how, those people are still looked after by society. And I don't think there's anyone that would ever disagree with that. But then there's a lot of people with a disability that, to all intents and purposes, want to work, they're able to work, but society's not maybe aware of the barriers, and there's that side of it. But very much to what you spoke about with employability, it's also having the skills and the confidence really to go and grab opportunities and make things happen. And I think that space you're sort of saying you're in lately holds such a key on a number of levels, because it shows the world that we as disabled people are valuable in different meanings and different narratives, if you like. But of course, on an individual level that gets work, it's financial independence, and it leads to a whole load. So it really is a really powerful sort of role to play. So what sort of you say you're freelance? How does that work? Are people paying? Because I talk quite a lot about the business model and entrepreneurship, and so from your side, like, is there sort of funding from government and charities that underwrite it a lot of the time?
Essentially, I'm freelance. I'm self-employed, so people pay me a fee for their coaching,
Yeah,
and where they source that money is entirely
that's up to
down to
them.
them.
Yeah,
I'm not a registered charity, so I don't have funding available. But what I do is I have a sort of very flexible pricing policy. So
yeah,
there's no sort of fixed price around how much coaching sessions cost. What I tend to do is through building a rapport with somebody is begin to understand what their financial situation is, and then negotiate a fee that they feel that they feel warrant spending on their success, on their progress,
yeah,
and that's also acceptable to me. And I think 9 times out of 10, we come to an arrangement, and then the client pays me, and it's usually for a block of coaching sessions.
yeah,
I work very much from a sort of social model of disability perspective.
yeah.
And I always have. I didn't realise I was doing that early on. I'd never heard of the social model of
Yeah,
disability.
didn't label it, but you were doing it.
Yeah, till I went to disability or radar disability
Yeah,
actually. But I work from a sort of holistic approach to coaching, but very much from a skills and strengths perspective, and an I can do attitude rather than I can't do, which is one of the reasons I love coaching, because it's all about
yeah,
what you can do and
yeah,
building on what you can do. And I've also begun to realise that, and I first recognised it in myself, is that pretty much every person I've ever met who has a disability has some form of honed or highly developed skill. And those skills are skills they've developed as a result of all the barriers and challenges that they've encountered through their life experience.
yeah,
So, things like I'm very determined, I'm very resourceful, I'm very resilient. And they're key skills that I've had to really, really develop as I've gone through this journey. And I recognize that and those skills more often than not when I'm coaching people.
yeah. No, it's like you say, it's sort of there's things that we all feel in ourselves, and obviously you and I have mixed within some of the disability inclusion circles now, and again you see it elsewhere, and it is quite helpful having those methodologies and those frameworks to I suppose to simplify and just to follow a blueprint. And I know the social model for me was, and that word again, empowering. It was a massively empowering moment to
Yeah.
feel I'm not the issue or the problem, is the barriers of society that we collectively can pull down. But I also remember there were some people that it almost created an excuse because society is disabling us. Why bother? And then that's where your point about can-do attitude and skills and resourcefulness is so important, because if we don't educate and drive change, no one else is going to. So I always felt, you've worked with many people in many different contexts in many different ways, but I always felt you were empowering leaders to go out and make sort of those ripple changes exponentially.
Yeah.
And I think that was partly what the narrative was at the Leadership Academy, right? With Radar. So how did you come to get involved with Radar and with that particular program?
I've no idea. I can't remember. It's a very long time ago.
It's all like networking and that, isn't it?
Well,
Really?
I think it's through networks. But I think they actually put out an ad for coaches. They were looking to employ a whole team of coaches to work on that particular program. And I'd also been sitting on the Disability Rights Leadership Academy board as well at one point. I think it sort of came about through all of that, really.
Yeah. But what did that program, mean on a personal level? What did it mean to you? But on a societal or disability inclusion level, what kind of things did you see and experience there that are worth for the viewers to understand that program a bit better, really?
Well, from a personal level, it gave me the opportunity to contribute some of my own thinking, my own skills, my own energy, and hopefully perhaps encourage and inspire other people to live a productive life, a life in which they were achieving the things that were important to them. But very specifically, one of the criteria for people coming on the program was that they had a desire to become leaders in some form or another. So it was really about unpicking what leadership skills were, and whether people had them or whether they had needed to develop them. And essentially, that's how we use coaching. You use coaching to identify what the goals were around leadership, what it was they wanted to achieve in the longer and the shorter term, and then identify what skills they already had that they were using, and then think about what other skills they needed to develop in order to achieve what they wanted to achieve. And you're one of those, if I remember. So I remember you talking about wanting to be an entrepreneur from the outset. And here you are. Some years on, being an entrepreneur and doing very well.
Still making
that wasn't down to me, that was down to you. That was down to the work that you did and the work that you put into it. And that's important to remember around coaching. And coaching is about you doing the work. I'm here to support you through the relationship with you, to help you understand, help you form goals, help you understand what the barriers might be, and then figure out strategies for overcoming those. And then it's about you doing the work, you taking the action that moves you forward.
No, I agree. And I think for me, I remember that there was I had a lot of energy and ambition, and there was almost so much opportunity, but it was having that help to distill my thinking a bit more, as you say, into like goals that were actually understandable. It made it all more tangible and less frantic, if you like. And having that structure, and as you say, sort of knowing your strengths and knowing your weaknesses and all of that just helped make everything more comprehensible, really. And then from that place of understanding, you can set about a plan and a blueprint to chase after. And obviously in real life, it doesn't go exactly as you think in the beginning. There's always obstacles and detours and all the rest of it, but it still helped to have a bit more of a what's the destination on the sat nav that I'm trying to get to at the moment.
And more often than not, for people with disabilities, there are more barriers and more challenges and more obstacles. So the process might take a bit longer, or you might need to get more creative about how you overcome them. But that's where our ability to be resourceful comes in. I think there are always many solutions to a barrier, to a problem, and it's about trying out different things. Which is why coaching. Why coaching is about committing to a series of sessions with a coach. You don't achieve it overnight. It takes time. It's about building a relationship and developing a strategy and working through that together. And I think one of the important things, coach, you're not alone on the journey. Somebody is there to support you, to champion you, to encourage you.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I want to move a bit into sort of now and COVID and the way the world is for sort of disability and for coaching, and also looking ahead beyond COVID. Is there positives potentially making a change, or is there more concerns rather than positives? Like just some general thoughts from your perspective. But I think just one quick thing before we move on was around that point of methodology. Was there anything else you wanted to just to double check? Was there anything else you wanted to share in that space of the conversation?
In terms of my methodology and in terms of the current pandemic, essentially what I'm doing now is I'm doing all my coaching by telephone or Skype or Zoom. So I'm doing it that way. But I've been doing it that way for quite some time, so it hasn't been a huge shift for me. I do some face-to-face coaching, but obviously it has to be socially distanced. But most of it is done, remotely and done from the comfort of someone's own home or office, which makes it more accessible. That's how I'm doing it these days, and I'm doing it more and more these days. I've just had a new website actually done, and I've just said on the new website I'm going to do it all remotely as much as possible. Also, I now have a physical disability as well, and I live with high levels of pain. So for me, I prefer to be able to work from home. It makes my work more accessible, if you like, for me as well.
So taking that sort of from your perspective, that makes a lot of sense. That even if there wasn't the physical disability and the pain, it's generally people are finding it a bit easier not to always have to be tearing around to the next
Absolutely.
meeting and that. But obviously,
Yeah.
from a perspective of disabled people, I've heard it quite a lot that we've been calling out for a long while for remote education, remote work, remote theatre productions. Like YouTube had the National Theatre live streams. It did feel that COVID has created certain services, if you like, that disabled people have been calling for years.
It's removed some barriers.
Yeah, exactly.
It's removed access barriers, which is a positive outcome of COVID.
Yeah.
So, sorry, go.
Well, I was going to say, just in a general way, have you seen any other sort of positives for the community at the moment, and what are the things that are maybe concerning from your perspective?
Well, I think it's to some extent it's disbanded communities, particularly when people were coming together in a face-to-face environment. So, I think isolation is an important issue that we need to be thinking about, and I've been thinking a lot about through this process. I live alone, and for the first few months of COVID, I never saw another human being unless it was using Skype or talking to somebody on the telephone.
It's the same, is it?
Yeah. So so for me, I've had to coach myself through the process.
Yeah.
And I've had to sort of identify goals for myself throughout the process, so that I felt I was achieving something and using my time productively. But I've also had to ensure that I spent time and energy and putting energy into my networks, so that I did connect with people daily, and I did see people on the screen daily, or talk to people daily, because I think isolation can be a killer. I mean, it can be very, very damaging. And I guess my other concern about the COVID situation is the impact that it will have. It is already having on people's mental health.
Yeah, that's a big one.
And people's sense of hopelessness and isolation and helplessness, and all those things start to appear. Yeah, I mean, I'm very conscious of that. I'm about to start working with a new company, mental health service provider, doing coaching, and I suspect that a lot of the issues I'll be talking about will be the sort of issues that have become highlighted as a result of COVID, around isolation and lack of networks and getting sustainable support.
Yeah.
And the thing about the COVID situation, particularly if you're on your own, or maybe not if you're on your own, is that you have to be, in order for you to change that situation, you have to be quite proactive.
Yeah.
You have to get off your bum, figuratively speaking, and do something about it, because the world doesn't necessarily come to you.
Yeah, that resonates with me actually, because I've, as you know, been very sociable. Like it almost got into a perpetual cycle that I was being invited to speak at conferences and to go abroad and blog about the experience. And so I wasn't actually having to, as you sort of say, get off my bum and make it happen, because I did that years ago with, when we were working together. That was me making it happen. And then for years it sort of was self-perpetual. But I've found that I'm not off to the conferences at the moment. I'm not going abroad. And there are things going on in my town and in my region of Cambridgeshire, but I've sort of got out the habit of being a bit more proactive. So I've been having a word with myself the last week to sort of say, go see someone for a socially distanced walk in a park or wherever it might be, but definitely feeling that isolation and the mental health effects, really, because we've all been scared out of our wits, where regardless of all going into the facts and figures, but the media, it's just like, if you go out you're gonna die kind of thing. It's quite
I think I think people's anxieties levels have really increased, and certainly my own anxiety levels have fluctuated up and down throughout the whole process. So I've really had to think about how I'm managing my anxiety as well, and be quite proactive in doing that. There have been days when I've just wanted to curl up under the quilt and not think about it and go into denial. But ultimately, I've had to get up and do something about that. But for me, one of the positives about COVID is I no longer have to commute every day to go and do training courses, and because by the time I get there, I'm exhausted or I'm already in high levels of pain. So for me, it's just made it more accessible.
There are pros and cons. So as we come out of, well, not even come out of it, but for the next few months, we're in this state of living within a pandemic, and then one way or another, we hope there'll be some sort of semblance of normality, even if some things have changed. But for you with coaching and that tool, if you like, and that contribution that you bring through coaching, how do you see that playing a role?
Well, as I said, I'm about to start working with a mental health provider, and I'm going to be doing lots of coaching with people with various mental health problems, helping them work on their own goals or own individual goals. I'm about to start doing some other stuff with a company called the Ecovist London Foundation that do employability training for various charities. So we're going to continue those programs. Numbers of cohorts will be smaller because we need to social distance, but we are going to be doing some face-to-face training as well, and workshops. But a lot of it will evolve into Skype, Zoom, telephone, and it works very well via Skype and Zoom and telephone. So using those methods of communicating are not a barrier to coaching.
No, but in terms of societally, I mean, it feels like everyone probably could do with coaching. Like even the Prime Minister probably could do with coaching.
Well, I mean, I think it's highlighted and got us to think about whether it's necessary for so many people to be, commuting into cities and using these huge office buildings, and actually people have been proven to be very productive working from home. And that might be an advantage to a lot of people with disabilities or living with disabilities. And so I do think opportunities will come out of it. But I think, it will change the way we network with each other. And I think we're going to be doing that again. We're going to be doing that remotely and virtually as well. But it's interesting times. I mean, I've lived through one pandemic, and this is a new one. I guess I picked up a lot of skills myself when I was living through the HIV epidemic, which I've been able to sort of transfer and use through this experience as well. And I suspect that in my coaching, I'll be identifying skills that people already have that they're going to bring to this new way of living that they can use in this new environment, in this new way of living life.
Well, I mean, it's not about pandemic and epidemics, but I've always been pretty sociable. But like you say, going out and about, like I'm fortunate I don't have the pain side, but like fatigue and health is still a general, particularly in the winter. And then this thing called social media happened, and I can sit at home in the winter with the heating on, and I can still get to know new people through social media. So I think the internet has definitely been a big positive for the social side for a lot of disabled people, and also the kind of giving a voice and empowering, to use that word again and again. But I think I think you're right with the workplace, where possible. Why have all that commute and that hassle if you can do it at home? I think that point you made about isolation is the one that we still need to watch. That if we do all work at home, where do we get that fix of actually being with people in a room? Because I think we do all need that on a basic fundamental level as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I still need to get out at least once or twice a week. I still go down the pub and have a pint with my friends, even though there's only a few of us. We're socially distancing, but that's still important too, and I make sure I do that. now that we have the opportunity to do that. I think the world of disability has advanced so much in my career, during my career, and over the last 50, 40 years. I suspect that people living with disabilities will play a role in how we adapt to COVID-19 and how we continue to live our lives. I suspect they will play quite a significant role in that.
Yeah, I think you're right. All right, well, we're coming towards the end, Danny. Well, I mean, the big one is how can people follow and keep in touch and reach out to you if they're looking for support?
Okay, well, there's a new website, which is, I think it's already gone live, actually, which is www.dannywest.co.uk.
Brilliant. dannywest.co.uk.
That's it. And then my email is danny.west944@btinternet.com.
And are you on LinkedIn?
I am on LinkedIn. You can find me on there.
Yeah,
Danny West, come up. Google me, I come up as well. So I'm on YouTube as well, I think, somewhere.
You're in all the right places.
I'm in the right places. Yeah, I mean, I'm not the best at IT and doing all these things, but I have people that help me.
Yeah, well, that you say about working, as long as you have been in this space. I mean, I know, and as much as the internet's been a lot of positives for everyone, including you, it's it's been a big shift the last 20 years in how coaching's carried out, as you were saying, with Zoom and video and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, interesting.
Absolutely.
Is there any final words you want to leave people watching?
No, I mean, it's just that I'm passionate about the coaching process. I believe coaching works.
Yeah.
It's important to remember that if you want to achieve goals, you have to be 100% committed to them. I will always be 100% committed to the people I'm working with, but people will not achieve their goals unless they're committed too. And it's my job to keep people motivated and help them overcome any barriers as they encounter them whilst on that journey to achieving them. But I mean, coaching isn't really about what you can do. It's about building on success, and it's about succeeding.
And I think one thing I took from my experience of doing it, and from what you were articulating now, that some people almost think it's a way of outsourcing responsibility or sort of passing the buck, and loud and clear, it's coming through. That's not the case.
No, it's not the case. You have to do the work, but I will support you all the way. And I'm also very resourceful. I'm very holistic in my approach, so I can offer all sorts of resources to people. I can share my own experience, from which hopefully people get some inspiration or some idea about how they might, overcome their own barriers. So I try and be as resourceful as I can. But essentially, coaching is about, the person who's being coached, the coachee, doing the work, and me, being in that space with them whilst they progress to achieve their goals.
Yeah, and I can definitely speak from experience. That was what we went through, and it helped me in abundance. So I always am grateful for your support during that. Felt quite like a crossroads actually for me, because I'd left my job and it could have all gone horrifically wrong. And and nothing would have ever been wrong, because if that was the sliding door, I would have gone back into employment, and I'm sure it would have been an equally lovely life. But thankfully I was able to realize those goals that we worked on setting. So yeah, I'm always very thankful.
That's because you were very committed to those goals and you worked very hard at them. And it takes time. It takes time to achieve goals. Obviously different lengths of time for different goals. Yeah. But you stuck with it, and you were very committed to the process.
Yeah, definitely.
And now you're reaping the benefits of that.
Yeah.
And so are we, through the work that you do.
Yeah, it's that ripple effect we talked about earlier, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right, Danny, it was a pleasure to catch up. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and everyone watching, thanks for your time, and I hope you've enjoyed it. And those watching back on the replay, feel free to put any comments and share it and all the rest of it. So we'll see you tomorrow for the next episode. And Danny, take care.
It's been a pleasure. Absolute pleasure. Lovely to see you again.
You too, mate.
Bye-bye. Okay, bye.